welcome to this episode of Dowd's Fulfilment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurym, as we continue our journey through the words that were spoken prophetically of Dowd's Fulfilment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurym. Oh, I'm so happy you can join me there, Wook. It is a pleasure to share the stage with you. He's back into Wookiee mode where he sees himself on the screen and wants to make sure he's getting top billing, not that other dog that looks exactly like him. This is actually something that is about as important, profound, timely as anything that we could share with you. We are now in the midst of enduring the Christian Holy Week as they move towards what they would call the Last Supper, and then Good Friday, and then Jesus did nothing on Saturday. He just rested in the tomb. To their resurrection scene on... Okay, Wookie, why don't we just come back right over here and just chill out and be a good co-host. That guy over there, he's not going to bother you because that's you. Co-hosts are hard to find, and I thought I really had a good one here, so we'll have to see if he mellows out. And then to Resurrection Sunday. And of course, it's all a hoax. There was no Jesus. There was no Mr. Christ. There was no Last Supper. There was no Good Friday. The death of Jesus didn't happen. It was actually fulfillment of Passover by the actual Son of God, the real Messiah, the one who is our Savior, Dowd, David. And he is the one who came in his second of three lives to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurym. And so the rest of this stuff is just religious nonsense. You can't call it all identity theft and counterfeiting, because some of what is portrayed by the Christians is just pure pagan regurgitation. For example, Easter is named after Esther, who is Astarte, the Mother of God, Queen of Heaven, Madonna and child that is condemned by Yahweh throughout the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. We find that it is Asherah, Astarte, as the Mother of God and the Queen of Heaven in the Canaanite and Phoenician religions that is specifically condemned by Elijah, along with the Lord, who is Baal. These are the essence of the Christian religion, and yet Yahweh despises them, calls them false gods, and condemns them, and yet Christians named their holiest day after a pagan deity that Yahweh condemns. And the whole notion of a dying and resurrecting God does not come from Yahweh, because there is no such thing. It is by ripping off the pagan lore of Babylon with Tammuz. He did that. With Osiris, he did that too. With Dionysus, he was most famous for that. And then, of course, Bacchus, which is a derivative of Dionysus, he did that as well. And so the resurrection is a myth based upon the pagan customs of the day, so that Christianity would be popular among them. And the whole thing is not just utter nonsense. The whole thing isn't just a bit of replacement theology, because much of it is just repulsive religious jargon, stolen from the very places that Yahweh says that if you want to have a relationship with him, you must be called out of, which would be Babylon. and which would also be the beast of Rome, and therefore Roman Catholicism. And so it is with a heavy heart that I fight this madness and monster throughout social media. Many of you listening are going to be privy to my posts where I overtly condemn all references to Easter. I did so on Palm Sunday. I will continue to do it all week. Every time I see a post that mentions anything about Mr. Christ, Jesus, a Easter, salvation through Christianity, faith, I assail it. It's my job is to expose it and condemn it. I know I typically do not do so for Christians because it's not my job to save them from their religion. I do so for God's people, Israelites and Yehudim. And the reason I do it for them is quite simply a rabbi named Paul created this myth of Christianity through his 14 letters and what he inspired Luke and Mark to write on his behalf. And unfortunately, he piled his lies right on top of the truth so that it is difficult now for Jews to recognize that there actually was a returning Messiah and Son of God who served as our Savior in 33 CE that was corrupted and counterfeited into the myth of Jesus Christ. And well, I've brought a lovely beverage here. We'll see if I get to drink any of it or if my Wookiee gets it first. He is quite the lush, you know. I think it's nothing but watermelon juice. That would be correct. But it's watermelon juice with a plumeria in it. And folks, for those who are unfamiliar with the plumeria, it is my favorite flower. I have here on our property several hundred plumeria trees. I bought what's called cigars. They're pieces like this long, just of a stem of a plumeria from all around the tropics, particularly from Hawaii, but throughout the tropics, and imported them here and have subsequently cloned them. And now I must have 400 or 500 plumeria trees that are all around my home here on our property in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So this is a special flower for me, and my wife knows it. So the bottom line here is that not only is everything that is attributed to Jesus a complete and outright lie, one caused by the Rabbi Paul, who Yahowah calls out by name, and I'm going to do a series here shortly on the book of Habakkuk, because Habakkuk was inspired to condemn Paul by name, calling him the plague of death, exactly 666 years prior to Paul writing his first letter, that being the one to the Galatians, which was the first written document in Christendom. And we will do that. But for now, I will just tell you that the entire mythos of Jesus Christ is a complete fraud. No one existed by that name. There is no evidence to the contrary to what I'm saying in the Christian New Testament. And of course, there is absolutely no reference to a Jesus, to a Mr. Christ, to Christian, to church, to Gentile religions. None of that exists anywhere in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. And so all these lies that were used, the credibility of Yahowah and Dowd and the prophets to validate themselves are nothing but a pile of abominable lies. If you are a Christian, you are not pleasing God, you're infuriating him. Now, the same thing would be true with Judaism. And the reason it's true with Judaism is that, first of all, God is anti-religious, and the religion that has had the most nefarious effect on Jews, precluding a reconciliation with Yahowah, is in fact Judaism, but it is Judaism's fault for not recognizing all of the many hundreds of prophecies, like the ones that we're going to dive back into now in the 22nd Mizmor, that prove that Dowd is the one who arrived in 33 CE to fulfill Pesach, Matzah Bikurym, and should have been recognized as Dowd, as the Messiah, as the Son of God, as our Savior at that time. And it was rabbis who not only failed to recognize him and denied him, as this prophecy said they would, but they also foisted another false Messiah on the world, there as being Bar Kokhba. So as we move on to address the pronouncement that Dowd continues to make, we are faced with an interesting opportunity to think our way through the Messiah's lyrics. And this is because we have not been told, because we don't need to know, how Yahweh engineered the placement of Dowd's soul in the body that was used to serve as the Passover lamb, that of course would be discarded that night. To fulfill Passover, the remains of the body is incinerated that night. Therefore, there of course cannot be a bodily resurrection. If there's a bodily resurrection, you can't be the Passover lamb, which means you couldn't have saved anybody, which means the whole Jesus thing is a complete fraud anyway. But the fact of the matter is that while we're not told how God reconstituted a body for Dowd and placed a soul in it, it's not something, A, that we need to know, and B, it's not even something that would be all that difficult for God to do. Souls are an interesting phenomenon in that science has no clue what a soul is. They know it has no weight. They know it can't be measured in terms of its energy. They know it exists. They cannot define it. They can't describe it. They can't reproduce it. They can't explain it. But they know that the moment that a soul leaves an animal, the animal is dead. And they also know that without a soul, there is no life. They also know that the difference between animals and plants, both organic beings, both life, is that an animal has a soul. An animal has consciousness that enables that animal to respond to and observe, observe and then respond to stimuli, the environment around it. It is the most unique characterization differentiating animals from plants. All humans have a nefesh, a conscience, a soul, but so do all other animals. And so this is something that Yahweh conceived. And since he conceived it, he is clearly capable of protecting it and projecting it. And we know that he is doing this because he is on record saying that he will project Dowd's nefesh forward such that he returns as the king of the universe. And that will occur on Yom Kippurim in 2033. So it is souls also that we are told that we should cherish, because that's the only part of us that can move from this mortal existence to eternal existence. Because in eternity, our soul matters, but our body is useless. Just as the Passover lamb's body was discarded, a physical body past this time on this planet is completely useless and indeed counterproductive, because it's another problem with the Christian bodily reincarnation myth, is that it would be a move that would be entirely counterproductive. You want to go from a material being that is stuck in the normal passage of time, essentially stuck on this planet and stuck in a finite period of time, to an energy-based being like light, where you can be immortal, you can be perfected, you can be expanded and empowered and enabled to the tune of E equals MC squared in this particular case. So it is just vastly superior. And it is vastly inferior to maintain a physical body, which is why the Christian myth is just stupid. Uh, now, recreating a body would also be fairly easy for Yahowah. It is obvious that DNA is a language. It is actually a three-dimensional language, and that languages all have those who are authors using them and deploying them and writing them. And in this case, Yahowah used DNA to write life into existence and to code different forms of life. Therefore, Yahowah would, having authored the DNA code, which is the only way that we can even explain its existence, is fully capable of using some of Dowd's DNA from his first life and creating a new body based on exactly that DNA match for a second life, and putting his nefesh soul, which Yahowah would have had in Shamayim, into it. So while we're not told the scientific process for doing this, it isn't hard to understand. It's not hard to explain. So now returning to the role of first-person narrator, which Dowd announces that he wrote this Mizmor, this psalm, and it is delivered in first person, which means that he is the one fulfilling Pesach, Matzah Bikurym. The principal author and actor, the eyewitness, the only eyewitness to these events, is the Messiah, Dowd. And he is trashing here what would become another Christian myth. Of course, he's writing this 1,000 years before Christianity would even exist. Indeed, it says Key, truly by contrast. You, and this is from Atta, had me to gush forth and thrash about in normal childhood, normal childbirth, if you will. Gerach ani men brought me out through the normal pushing process, only to wiggle around and fight through. The primary meaning of garash is surge, push, or burst forth as part of customary childbirth, making this a graphic depiction of breaking the water, leading to pushing the baby out during delivery. So indeed, you had me to gush forth and thrash about in normal childbirth from the womb, causing me to rely upon my mother's breasts. Mizmor Song 22:29. Now, in the Jewish Publication Society Tanakh, if you're following along in that, they're one verse further along because they incorporate the introduction to this Mizmor as verse 1, so they're now at verse 10. Okay, so by using Gerach men, this becomes a graphic depiction of natural childbirth, which is the opposite of the miraculous nativity that Christians claim. Now, there is no miraculous nativity. First of all, even the prophet Yeshayah was so distraught with the stupidity of and the religious ignorance of his people. He just said, "You want a sign? Okay, I'll give you a sign. A woman's going to have a child." That was it. It doesn't say that a virgin is going to give birth. And while Christians are lied to and told that there was a virgin birth because, well, they want a mother goddess that matches Astarte, Asherah, Ishtar for Easter. The fact is there is no such thing, and this would destroy that myth. However, the question really is would there be any reason for Yahowah to do this twice, much less 3 times? Or is one Garash men sufficient? And I think the answer is one Garash men is sufficient. That Dowd was born the old-fashioned way through the normal childbirth process. His mother was not artificially inseminated by Yahowah. Now, it is interesting here even that when we look at Dowd's birth mother in his first of 3 lives, We know literally nothing about her. She doesn't have a single speaking role, unlike everything that Christians attribute to the mythical Mary. We don't even know her name. Dowd doesn't even mention her name. There's no mention of a name anywhere else as well. He's the single most important person to ever live, and his mother's name is unknown. His mother never engaged in any way that was meaningful enough for Dowd to share a single word. We are told elsewhere that Dowd escaped a plot to kill him with his mother, but that's the only mention of her. And that was he was a young man at the time, early adulthood, long after, by the way, Goliath was gone, which means the whole depiction of the House of Dowd thing with Mommy Dearest coaching him and Mommy Dearest getting in the way of the lion to save her son and giving him all sorts of spiritual guidance is just stupid, because she did not die while he was a 8-year-old child. There's no indication she said anything, but rabbis like to project themselves into the story, and therefore they created all this muck, and the House of David was based upon rabbinic garbage regarding Dowd. See, Christians aren't the only one to corrupt his story. Rabbis did it too. So this particular word at least completely trashes the idea that the Messiah and Son of God was miraculously born. Of course, Christians need this, because how else could he be God? It's one thing for God to say, Dowd is my son, I am his father, which he says on 3 different occasions. Of course, he never says anything like that about anybody else, much less a Jebus. So now we're in a situation where Christians want Jebus to be more than just a Messiah and a son of God. They want him to be a God. And so the only way for him to be a God is, well, big old God back then, they've forgotten what his name is. They don't even have a clue as to what his name is. But this unknown God somehow impregnated Mary so that the child that was born would actually literally be God's son. Not God's son from a figurative point of view. No, literally, God got Mary pregnant. Now, even beyond that, there is a 0% chance that YAHOWAH, did that, but beyond that he would choose a person named Miriam, because Miriam is the example, the one example in the entirety of the Torah where we're told she is so wrong, so obnoxious, so rebellious, so contentious, that YAHOWAH said, I don't give a damn if your father spit in your face. And that's graphic language, right? Said that to her. I wouldn't care if your father spit in your face. You're ostracized. And not only ostracized, you're leprous. You're diseased. You're nothing but a mad hornet, a fatling. Never going to be reconciled with Israel again. Well, she came back into the community. She didn't come back to the community that was associated with YAHOWAH. And when her name is mentioned the one last time in the Torah, it's used specifically in Devarim to say she is the example of divorced, gone, estranged, never to be back again. And her crime? She claimed that she too spoke for God, which is what the Christian New Testament writers are doing, that they too spoke for God. Her crime is the very crime that they did. So by choosing that name, they're saying that they are both guilty of that crime and stupid. So I think that what this is telling us is for certain that Dowd's first life was as the Son of God, as the one that God chose to define as his firstborn son. as a prophet, as king, as the one inheriting all that Yahweh has to give as his firstborn, that as his chosen one, that Dowd's first coming into this world was the old-fashioned way. His father, Yishai, impregnated his mother, who we just know that his mother wasn't, well, mother's not part of the story. There's some question about his mother's reputation, his mother's heritage. All we're told is that there's something wrong there, but he was definitely born the other way, and that's why Dowd was out there shepherding sheep and not with the rest of his brothers with Dad. He was ostracized because, well, he had a mother that there was a reputation issue there, and yet he was born the normal way. I personally, I find this sort of interesting, that particularly for me, my father was exceedingly abusive, and my mother sided with my father. And that's tough for a young man growing up. So I know what it's like to be in this kind of a situation. And I know that it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me because I had to overcome it. Overcoming an abusive father is not easy. Overcoming an abusive father when your mother is supporting the one who is abusing you as opposed to you as her child makes it harder. Yishai was a jerk. Dowd's father, he was a bummer. I mean, he was this way is depicted in the house of David is just not true. He everything he says is contrary to what's true. And his mother has a questionable reputation. So that's how he came into this life, and he overcame those things, and in overcoming them, he developed character. I've been kind of forced through this expression in social media, which Yahowah asked me to engage in after having spent 23 years as a translator of his testimony and commentator on his words, and books like these. And in fact, this is the book right here that the 22nd Mizmor is presented, that I'm sharing it with you out of. That I always wonder what it was about me that caused God to say, okay, you're my guy. We're going to do this. I'm going to reintroduce my name through you. I'm going to reacquaint Yisrael and Yehudim with Dowd and what he has accomplished through fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurym, that he is the real Messiah, Son of God and King through you. And I'm going to expose and condemn religion through you. What did he see in me that would cause me to him to choose me? And part of it says, well, I was by default. There was nobody else that was willing to listen and do this job. But that's not really true. And I've been making a lot of posts here on X, and as I do, I just like we're talking about things, and I'll get back to this story, but I think it's important here. We're talking about tariffs and the imposition of tariffs on China and what the consequence is going to be and how that's supposed to be stimulating American manufacturing. And I ended up writing a whole essay on my personal experience. The fact that I was among the very first people, maybe the first group, to go into China after Nixon made it legal, and had that experience and met with all the dignitaries in China, as well as the common people of China, back now 50 years ago. And that 40 years ago, I was among the very first, if not the first, to begin to open enterprise zones inside of China based upon lovely, productive relationships with the Taiwanese businessmen and businesswomen. And I'm also a unique in the sense that I began U.S. manufacturing. And I was challenged to find people who could make tools, dies for the products that I had invented, and was challenged to find laborers who you could teach to do a job and work against all of the U.S. restrictions and all of the rules that favored the employee over the person trying to hire them, and the taxation and I learned firsthand that China didn't beat America and rob America of these jobs. America lost them because it became too difficult to manufacture in America. And we lost the infrastructure for manufacturing. And we lost even the will to work at a manufacturing job and to produce value. And I came to know the Chinese. I came to know these enterprise zones. And I lived it. Just like Moshe lived the religion and the militarism and the caste system of Mitzrayim, Egypt. He knew it because he lived it. I lived it. I knew these things. I was writing today about Franklin Graham, claiming that that Jesus died for that anybody believes in him would have eternal life, and I was able to say, I know where Franklin Graham was educated. It was Liberty University, and I knew the founder of Liberty University as well, maybe better than anybody ever. Spent tens of thousands, thousands of hours, well, not tens of thousands, maybe, but thousands of hours with him. We were very close. And I remember at my last meeting with Jerry going through every one of the lies that Franklin Graham posted. There was no Jesus. There was no Mr. Christ. Faith is not the answer. The matter of fact is that it's the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah Bikurym that count. And there is no mention of a Christian, no mention of a Christ, no mention of Christianity anywhere in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. And I had this long meeting with Jerry. At the end of it, he said, "You're right. Everything you said is true." And that's where Franklin Graham was educated, which means that Franklin Graham knows that it's not true. He does it for the money, for the prestige. But who else has had that kind of an experience? I've traveled in 175 countries. Who else has had that kind of experience? The world is going to war against Russia, using the Ukraine as a proxy. I'm one of the first people to ever travel through Russia from Leningrad at the time, as it was called, all the way into Siberia and back with a KGB agent. It's an amazing circumstance. And it was during that time that I learned to despise communism and socialism. And I was actually able to witness the contrast between East and West Germany, for example. Not only the contrast between the Soviet Union and the United States in terms of freedoms and opportunity and economic progress and that sort of thing, but I got to see free enterprise versus socialism side by side in East and West Germany. I also got to see that there was no difference between fascism and socialism, the same economic system, and was able to witness. How many people have also had the experience of being in the concentration camps and being in them in Poland at the time that Poland was still off limits to Westerners because it was inside the Iron Curtain. And that stifling environment. And shooting off my mouth and being escorted out of the Iron Curtain. Romania was my last stop at gunpoint. I've always had a big mouth. I've always stood my ground. And so Dowd was special here because, he was born the old-fashioned way. And he had a crappy father, just as I did. He had a crappy mother, just as I did. You've never heard me cite anything from my mother, have you? You've never even heard me name my mother, have you? He didn't either. There was nothing to say that was useful or edifying. And so his recognition that he was born in the old-fashioned way in travail. I mean, this is a tough term. This is travail. It's just telling you a little bit about his past that made him who he is. But it would not have occurred in his second or third life. Now, is it possible that Yahweh said, "All right, I'm going to have my son, the Messiah and King, who, well, uh, he is the one who conquered Jerusalem to make it the capital of Israel. He's the one that unified my people. He led 66 battles to defend my people. He's the one that acquired the Temple Mount. He's the one who wrote between the Mashal and the Mizmor, 100 of them, as the most prolific of the prophets. But I think I'll have him come back as a little baby, and to have to endure with these numbskulls for 33 years until we fulfill Pesach, Matzah Bikurym? Nah, it makes no sense. So I think Dowd was brought back. Maybe 3.5 years would be a nice time because Dowd's first life ended 3.5 years before year 3000 Yah, before Yahweh laid the cornerstone of his home through the 89th Mizmor Psalm. And Elia and I both arrive in Dowd's city, the city of Dowd, 3.5 years before Dowd's return to his home, his capital as king. So I think that's probably likely. So anyway, those are my thoughts. And but there is really a lot that we can learn from Dowd's statement here. So, as in his first life, Dowd was a newborn child like any others, and he had to rely on his mother's breast milk to fight infection to survive. This is as ordinary as childbirth gets. So sorry, Twistians, with your Christmas pageantry, but you got it all wrong. It simply did not happen that way. Surprisingly, even with billions of examples to study, scientists, I've shared this with you before, but I might have another insight that I can offer, and maybe just I'm going to reinforce what I've already shared with you extemporaneously. But scientists simply do not understand how a soul is generated during conception. There's no concept. They don't even study them anymore. They cannot describe its composition. They are, so keen to talk about life and evolution, and yet the very thing that distinguishes intelligent life, they can't describe, they can't quantify, they can't measure, they can't replicate. Got no clue. What is consciousness? And even go beyond that. With humans, there's also a conscience, nefesh, and a nesalma. So, since we cannot describe its composition, all we have is Yahweh's statements regarding it. We know that it exists, that all animals have one, and that it has no mass, and thus must be a form of energy, but even in its energetic state, we cannot detect it. And that its arrival is the spark of light, for its departure is coterminous with death, at least of the physical body, not necessarily of that entity in itself. An nefesh soul would go on to exist. It can be terminated, as God does in most cases, but it could continue to exist incarcerated or liberated. Therefore, based upon our inability to study even the most fundamental aspects of a nefesh soul, we should not be surprised that Yahweh clearly didn't define the process here, although we are told constantly that what happened next is the opposite of what happened prior to it. That Pesach is about the Bashar, the body serving as a herald, and that Matzah's fulfillment, as well as Bikurym, is about the nefesh, the soul, the consciousness of Dowd being the actor. Furthermore, I think that, as I've shared, the previous line depicting natural childbirth was literal of Dowd's first life, which was in travail, serving to denounce the fabled virgin birth of the counterfeit in his second life. There would have been no purpose to Dowd to return as a baby to endure Pesach and Matzah. We just as he's going to come back as king. When Dowd come back, Yahowah says he's going to come back Elyon, as if God. Brilliant as the sun in God's presence. He's going to reign as king. He's going to anoint the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. He ain't going to be a baby. And so there's no reason to bring him back as a baby in the second life either. So other than to denounce the Christian fable, we are left to explain why Dowd would insert a reference to gushing forth and a mother's breaths as an ode to his Passover sacrifice and the brutality of crucifixion, especially since he found so little comfort in his mother that she is never mentioned by him, other than to say that at one point he protected her life by taking her, I think of all places, it was certainly east of Israel, and I don't remember at the moment if it was Edom, but I think that may have been the case. We are aware of Dowd's other sacrifice, that of his Bashar herald, one already acknowledged by the inclusion of the crimson grub. So there are two sacrifices that are very similar to what happened with Dowd's Bashar body, and the second is with Dowd's Bashar herald. And that's why the first reference to any of this, particularly to that sacrifice of the corporeal body, began with the Towrah, the crimson grub that is synonymous with the red heifer of Numbers 19 and the sacrifice that will occur to perfect the adulterous woman of Israel for Dowd's return. So we also know that in terms of the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, my sacrifice on the day of the herald, for this remnant of Israel, there will be copious amounts of water that will gush forth, providing new life for Israel. We also know that the sacrificial animal, as a heifer, is best known for producing, nurturing milk that children must rely on to mature. So this could be Yahowah's coming full circle with his king and his herald. The great ram as a lamb and the rambunctious bull as a heifer on Pesach and Towrah in years 4,000 and 6,000 Yah, both offering their corporeal bodies so that the souls and bodies of Israelites might live. I think that is your reason. I think it's threefold. This is the battle that Dowd fought in his first life, same battle I fought. This is a renunciation of Christianity and the virgin birth. And this is a harbinger of what will come, which is why the story of the Towrah is presented. It's why there are waters gushing forth. There's why there is the reference to milk. Well, since this is one of the most important songs ever scribed, it might even be second unto the 89th Mizmor, although there are a lot of great ones. Clearly, the 89th Mizmor is in a class by itself. I have been careful not to take our attention away from its message while at the same time being thorough and examining my king's more obscure references so that they're not lost on us, because it is these nuances, these details that shape our understanding and help us grow. And in this regard, much of what I have shared with you, I've learned as a result of studying the 27th Mizmor. It is how we began this very volume here of Coming Home. Dowd Beloved, Volume 3, begins with a review of the 27th Mizmor, because you need to understand it before you appreciate everything that we're covering right now in the 22nd Mizmor. And so here's some insights from it. Yahweh, he is my light. He is my illumination, my enlightenment. He is my freedom, my deliverance and salvation, Yasha. Or and Yasha, what a pair to draw to. So whom should I respect and revere? Yahweh. Yahweh is the protector and fortress of my life. From whom should I fear? Wow. I just love these heartfelt renderings and lyrics from Dowd. You know, it begins with Yahweh, which of course is a death knell to rabbinic Judaism and to Christianity because they completely ignore the name of God. Yahweh is my light. That is what we're being transformed into, is light energy. We're being delivered from our physical bodies and even from our guilt, even from mortality as light. And Yasha speaks of all of that. And it is through a reverence and respect of Yahweh that we are protected from these things. And who was it that protected Yahweh but his Ruach spirit when Dowd was delivered into Sheol? That is how his life was preserved. So Dowd's saying, that being the case, who should I fear? That's my position. You've noticed I will be as blunt and as bold as is humanly possible. I fear no one. I'm going to tell you the truth. I really don't care how you respond to it. My job is to tell you the truth. And I do so because I don't fear any human. I don't fear any nation. I don't fear any religion, nor did Dowd. By encroaching upon me, immortal and ignorant countrymen seek to devour my person and my message and consume my body and proclamations. Here we are at Bashar. Bashar is something that I share with my Messiah, my King, and that we both offered our Bashar, I will, and he has, corporeal bodies to fulfill Moed Mikre. And we're both heralds of Yahweh's name and of his story and of our roles in his story. And as a result, we are both encroached upon by immoral and ignorant countrymen. My belittling adversaries, Shar, another loaded word, they will stumble and bring injury and ruin with their approach toward me, and they will fail and fall. Mizmor 27:2. We both are attacked by countrymen. I'm not sure that Dowd is attacked any more viciously than I am, but we both endure it, and we both endure it because we are both Bashars, heralds of Yahweh, and we will both offer our Bashar, herald, corporeal body to serve God's people. And our adversaries are those who will cause the Sar of Yisrael. They're the ones who rebelled against Dowd, but they are also the ones who are now responsible for the approach of the time of Yisrael's Shar, Yisrael's troubles, a time that's worse than any that has ever appeared prior in history. And the time of Jacob's troubles, well, it seems like it's already begun with the 10:7, which is exactly 10 years prior to the end of them all on 10/7/2033. The fact of the matter is that the worst of the time of Jacob's troubles actually commences 7 years before Dowd's return on September 22nd, 2026. And the purpose of these attacks is to cause us to stumble. Dowd did not. I will not. It is they who will fall. Even with him being pitched and inclined against me, my heart and thinking will not be anxious or apprehensive, nor show any fear or respect. Dowd was not quite as bold as I am. He was certainly bolder than I am when it comes to facing Israel's militant enemies, because he picked up his sword and fought 66 defensive battles on behalf of Israel. And I've not been asked to pick up a sword, but simply a pen. So we are different in that regard. We're also different in that the person who has been the most attacked and besmirched in all of human history is Dowd David. He has been robbed of his title Messiah, been robbed of his position as Son of God. He's been robbed of his accomplishment as our Savior. He's been robbed of every which way. And no one has contributed more or had more taken from him. But he said, the very fact he's saying, I'm not going to be apprehensive or anxious about this, what that tells us is that as a prophet, he has foreseen his redemption. Not in the sense of him being saved, but in the sense of him being embraced again and respected again by his own people, Yisrael, who he's already acknowledged denied him in the 22nd Mizmor. That is the job that I'm doing for him. Even if he is rising up and taking a stand against me to do battle and fight against this, I will remain confident and reliant. Dowd stuck it out. He, in his second of 3 lives, he was assailed, and yet he honored the promise that he had made. He fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurym. One thing I have asked from YAHOWAH through this, may I continuously seek to learn about me dwelling within the house and family of YAHOWAH all the days of my life, to look upon, observe, and gaze into the favorable acceptance and the loveliness of YAHOWAH, and to look at, inspect, and consider exploring in his sanctuary and home. 27:4. You know, there's a difference between what Dowd volunteered to do and what anyone had done previously, and what no one other than myself will do going forward. But in his case, his situation is infinitely more difficult than mine. He had to volunteer to leave heaven to be tortured by Rome, and then disgraced by the Roman Catholic Church and also by Judaism. He had to not only volunteer to fulfill Passover and allow the beast of Rome to rip the skin off of his body, but to then nail him to an upright pole, crucifying him, which is the most painful form of death ever inflicted on a human. And then for those who were occupying his city and his country, that he was king, to demean him and denounce him, all while his own people demeaned and denounced him. That's exceptional. I don't have to endure that, because even though I will be mauled by the corporeal manifestation of Satan, which is no different than being mauled by the beast of Rome, those who are opposed to what I'm doing are going to be instantly incinerated by the flames and the waters that YAHOWAH is going to release during my funeral, orchestrated by Elia, who is expert at denouncing and repudiating them. So my situation, I don't have to endure 2,000 years of having done this. and being besmirched and derided for it, as Dowd was. For me, those who've come in opposition to me will instantly be dealt with. And the children of Israel, who are the remnant that I have protected on Towrah, they're instantly going to benefit. So it's a very, very different scenario than what Dowd has had to endure. And of course, no one else had to go into Sheol with his nephesh carrying our guilt there. And so he's saying, I volunteered to do this and everything, but I'm going to need some reassurance here. I need to know that when all of this is over, we have a happily ever after, that I'm coming back, that I'm dwelling within your house and family, and I'm going to be there all the days of my life, and I'm going to look upon and observe and gaze into this very favorable acceptance of Yahweh for having done this, that, we're doing this together, Yahweh. You need to reassure me that when it's all over, that my body may have died, but not my soul, and that I may have taken the guilt of every covenant member into Sheol with my soul, but you're releasing me, and I'm coming back to you, and that ultimately I'm going to live in your sanctuary and home. Well, it's a major whoop whoop for sure. But think of how important that would have been for Dowd. Now, we have what he wrote about this and his fulfillment of it to look back upon. And we have all that the prophets wrote about it to look back upon. And so we have something Dowd did not have. And furthermore, it took me 23 years before I figured out that I was going to be serving as the Adama Parah. And my circumstance is just so very, very different from what Dowd has accomplished. So I respect what Dowd wrote here. For he will conceal me in his shelter. During the day of destruction of shepherds and harmful countrymen, he will conceal me, causing me to vanish in the protection of his tent and tabernacle. Yes, as Rome would come to destroy the city of Dowd and destroy the very tabernacle there, the temple, and then come back and destroy all of Yehuda, and then the Roman Catholic Church would oppress it, and the Muslims would oppress it and subjugate it, and mankind every which way, that Yahweh removed him from all of that and protected him. Dowd is exactly where Peter and Paul said he was not. They claim that Dowd did not rise up to heaven. And this says exactly the opposite, that it's the harmful shepherds, the harmful and destructive countrymen who have attacked Dowd, trying to diminish his purpose while Dowd lives on. Then it reads, with a sharp crag, a divisive crag. That would be me. My name is Craig. He will lift me on high and will increase my prominence. 27:5. And then my stature will rise above my opposition, who are rancorous towards me on every side surrounding me. That is what I've been called to do. That is my life's work. No one else figured it out, not in all of human history. I was the first to figure it out. I was the first to step up and said, I realize telling this story is going to be the most difficult of my life, because the most popular religion in human history has robbed Dowd of all of this, and they're going to despise hearing it. But I'm not going to shirk from that responsibility. I will, as the sharp crag, lift Dowd up. I will increase his prominence to where it is deserved. I will increase his stature, and his stature will rise, and his opposition and those who are rancorous towards him, they will fall. I can assure you that I will see this job through. I want the sacrifice prepared in his radiant tent and tabernacle with the sacrificial offerings killed and presented during Towrah. I just paused to let that sink in. The culmination of my mission to elevate Dowd, to restore his reputation, to repudiate the myth of Jesus Christ and Christianity, and to reposition Dowd where he belongs as the firstborn son of YAHOWAH, of our Messiah and our returning King. Indeed, our Savior who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah Bikurym. My crowning achievement in this regard is not just the repositioning of Dowd and to his proper prominence with YAHOWAH. My crowning achievement is the restoration of Yisrael so that they embrace Dowd upon his return with YAHOWAH. And for that to occur, I must offer my Bashar body as the sacrifice, the Bach, before the radiant tent and tabernacle, as it will be restored and placed where the dome of the rock once stood. It will be removed, and a replica of the radiant tent of the tabernacle will be restored, and in front of it, in a four-horned replica of where the sacrifice would have been offered, with two horns representing the Passover lamb, Dowd, and two being myself as the bull. My body with planks of cedar, To'ala, thrown in, is up, will be consumed by the fire that YAHOWAH will light. And with waters that pour out from the Temple Mount to cleanse God's people and the resulting ash. And it's all going to occur during Towrah, Yom Towrah, the day of the herald. Here it is, and the 22nd Mizmor. Yeah, it's first time I've heard a whoop whoop on this from my wife, because this is a sacrifice. It is a big deal, and Dowd knows it. And so Dowd says, so I choose to sing because I want to make music for the enjoyment of YAHOWAH. That's why Leah, as a child of Yehudim, sings. The purpose of this sacrifice is the adulterous woman that is Yisrael, the final remnant of the mortal survivors of Yisrael at the end of the time of Yaakov's Sar troubles. They will be prepared finally to embrace Dowd as their groom. In the story of the adulterous woman in Numbers 5, as the presentation of the red heifer, the Adamah Parah, serves his function in Numbers 19. That is what's happening here. Your desire is to listen, YAHOWAH, to my cold voice, as I, Kara, called out. Boy, you have decided to favor and distinguish me, Chanan. Your will is preoccupied with me, to sing with me, to communicate through me, and to respond by providing me as the answer. Anah. 27:7. Every word. Powerful. I mean, boom, boom, boom. Your desire is to listen. Shama. Shama Yisrael. Finally. To whom? YAHOWAH. Dowd and I share. We both speak for YAHOWAH. Kol. we both fulfill. Kara, we both serve as those who call out, reciting the invitation to meet with YAHOWAH. Kara, you have decided to favor and distinguish me. Chanan, God is offering the ultimate gift of life through us. Your will is to be focused upon Dowd, to sing with me, to communicate through me, and to respond by providing me as the answer, Ana. Ana is the single most misunderstood and yet important word in the fulfillment of the 7 Moed Mikra, where we're asked to answer Yahweh's invitation. Kara is the invitation. Ana is our response throughout the Moed Mikra, so that we could come into Yahweh's presence. And we do that by listening to Yahweh as these invitations are made, Kara, regarding our opportunity to be favored and loved by Yah. And the ultimate answer to all of this is Dowd David, which is why his herald sings his songs. Mizmor 27:7. Regarding you, my thoughts and judgment acknowledge that you have chosen to call my presence into account. Therefore, your appearance, Yahweh, I consistently seek, request, and inquire about. 27:8. Dowd was inclined to think about and acknowledge, to answer Yahweh. Leb. His heart was after God's, which means that his judgment was consistent to Yahweh's. And it is Yahweh's presence that Dowd enters and returns alongside Yahweh's presence, constantly seeking, requesting, and inquiring about. You will not conceal your presence from me in a prolonged period of time. That Yahweh's assured Dowd that after his first life ended, 4 years shy of year 3000, they would be together again. And they have been. And 1,000 years later, Yahweh assured Dowd that his time of separation in Sheol, in the place of separation, would be brief and limited. That his presence would not be isolated from Dowd for a prolonged period of time. And of course, they're together again now. And they will always be together forevermore. You are not inclined to spread out or elongate frustration, resentment, or grievance with your coworker and associate. Dowd ran into some difficulties in his first life where there were some grievances between Dowd and Yahweh. Dowd's not perfect. He's like all that work with Yah. We are flawed. Yahweh likes us that way. I know he likes to perfect us, but he likes working through lovable rogues, people who are flawed but passionate.
Like us.
Like us. Just like us. And you notice this was a Ebed Ata, your coworker. God does everything through us, with us, because of us. This idea in Christianity, for example, that God did the work, that God came and he was the one who died. Nah, doesn't happen that way. God works through us. He has chosen to work through Dowd, his ultimate co-worker, but he chose to work through Moshe as well. And he worked through the prophets, whose words that we cherish. And now in the end, he has chosen to work through me, whether you like it or not. You have been my helper, my influential and powerful assistant, Ezra. Yes, indeed. By the way, Ezra is the person who's credited in writing the 89th Mizmor, but YAHOWAH wrote the 89th Mizmor, and it just says that speaks of YAHOWAH's ultimate role in assisting Dowd. And this is the way that God intends it to be. We don't help God. God helps us. We don't lift up God. He lifts us up. So you have been my helper, my influential and powerful assistant. You will never abandon me, just as you never reject or forsake me, O God, of my deliverance, my emancipation and salvation. Every step of the way that YAHOWAH worked with Dowd to provide our salvation, he worked with his son. He worked with Dowd. He provides our salvation through Dowd. It is true, my father and my mother had rejected and forsaken me, but YAHOWAH, having taken me in, will always be with me. Well, there's a little problem there for Christianity, isn't it? Because Mother Mary never forsakes her son. That I don't know, why is it the Queen of Heaven, the Mother of God, can have a son, but the son can't have a father, but nonetheless can have a human mother. And that speaks of pagan ideology for darn sure. And this affirms what I have said many times of Dowd, that his father and his mother rejected and forsaken him. Mine did me. It is part of of what we need to understand if we're going to walk away from the family of man and unto the family of God. It's an important statement here. It also means that the second statement on the second of the two tablets, to honor your father and mother, prolonging your days in the land, cannot be speaking of our earthly parents, can it? Because, well, in the case of Dowd's mom and dad, he says they rejected and they forsook him. And it's YAHOWAH who took him in. Now, I've done an entire show on the nature of who that mother and father had to have been for one to have improved their lives here in the Adamah. And it is the father and mother that YAHOWAH introduced the covenant. It's Abraham and Sarah. And it is the way that YAHOWAH takes us in. It is the way that YAHOWAH is always with us, is through the terms and conditions of that covenant as presented through that narrative with Abraham and Sarah. You want to guide and teach me your way, YAHOWAH. Your will is to reliably lead me, and by the upright, level, and correct, straightforward, agreeable, and elevated Mashor route on my account and on account of my adversaries. Yara is the root, the actionable root of Torah, means source of guidance and teaching. There is but one way in the Torah to YAHOWAH. It is through the Kara and Mikra, Moed, these restoring witnesses that YAHOWAH has offered, where we're invited to meet with him 7 times a year. Today we are celebrating the Moed Mikra of Bikurym, having just completed Pesach and Matzah. So it's YAHOWAH's will to teach us the way to him. And it's your will, Yahweh's will, to lead us to the upright, correct, and straightforward, agreeable, and elevated Mishor route on account of my adversaries. This is also the role that I have been asked to fulfill, to build this upright, straightforward path from man's polluted world to God's perfect home at this moment, and doing so right over and through all of the adversaries. We're similar in this regard. We're similar in that Yahweh is committed to teaching us so we can teach you. We're similar in coming to embrace this way to Yahweh, Pesach, Matzah Bikurym, Shabat, Towrah, and Kapurim leading to Sukkah. God's will is to lead individuals like Dowd and myself so that we can lead you. You have decided not to give me over to the soul of my adversaries who would diminish, belittle, constrain, and negate me. The adversarial soul. The most adversarial soul, of course, is Shaul, where Yahweh specifically said that the soul of Shaul is the plague of death. And it is Shaul who did more damage to Dowd than all other humans combined. Because without Shaul's condemnation of Dowd and robbing all things of Dowd to create the myth of his Iusu Christu, there is no Christianity. Without Christianity, there is no rabbinic Islam and a false Messiah and Bar Kokhba and no diaspora. Leading to the Babylonian Talmud, none of it exists. And without the Babylonian Talmud, there is no Islam. It does not exist either. So, you have decided not to give me over to that nefesh sar, that adversarial soul, who would seek to diminish, belittle, and constrain and negate me, who indeed will have risen up and established to take a stand against me, to bear false witness, to provide deceptive, misleading testimony, and commit fraud. These individuals, leading with Shaul, Paul himself, exude injustice and oppression, immorality and ignorance, wrongly plundering and terrorizing and destroying. He is speaking of Paul's creation of the religion of Christianity that is based on a crude counterfeit of Dowd. Identity theft. He is condemning the Christian New Testament in these words and saying that, yeah, they may have their run, but in the end, they will not prevail. And the reason they do not prevail is I am standing in the way. You may say that's biting off a lot for a single man to go against the three Abrahamic religions by himself, but I'm not by myself. I am standing right alongside Dowd. I have the seven spirits of Yahweh emboldening and enlightening every move that I make, every word that I speak. I will prevail against Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. And I will prevail on behalf of Dowd, our King, Messiah, the Son of God, our Savior. And I will succeed on behalf of Yahweh. They have foretold it. They have enabled it. They have proclaimed it. And we will achieve it. It is true, he says, that I am certain, knowing what is established, verifiable, and true. Amen. I have looked upon and witnessed, even revealed, the goodness and fairness, the appropriateness and attractiveness of Yahweh in the land of the living. Boy, did he ever. His psalms ooze forth a passion and a love, a respect for Yahweh. YAHOWAH is Dowd's father. He is a man whose heart, whose judgment, whose motivations, whose inclinations are inclined towards YAHOWAH. He is the fulcrum upon which the entire story of humanity pivots. And he was certain. He knew what was verifiable and true. He was the ultimate witness who revealed the goodness and the appropriateness of YAHOWAH, and whom YAHOWAH took and provided not only the insights to know him, and not only the man through whom he established his Berith covenant, but the one who provided all of the benefits of the covenant by working with YAHOWAH to fulfill Pesach, Matzah Bikurym. And Dowd, with his Mizmor, like this one, has conveyed all of this, the fairness, the goodness, the appropriateness, the attractiveness of YAHOWAH right now in the land of the living. Dowd is the voice of God. Dowd is the basis of the family of God. To deny him this, as Christianity, Judaism, and Islam have done, is appalling. You should choose to confidently place your expectations for a beneficial result, looking forward to YAHOWAH. You should want to be strong and to prevail, to be as tough as you are intense. And with your courageous character and reinforced judgment, you should choose to confidently place your expectations for a beneficial result by looking forward to YAHOWAH. Psalm 27:14. Hey, isn't that the truth? One of the advantages of going from the spoken word or the written word to the spoken word is that I can convey this confidence to you, looking into this camera and speaking directly to you in a way that cannot be done with simply ink staining paper. You know it's true. You can feel it. You can see it. It resonates within your soul. I am as Dowd has requested, and you should be too. Confidently placing our expectations for the ultimate beneficial result, looking forward to our time with YAHOWAH. You should join me in being strong, because we prevail. Be as tough as you are intense. Be courageous. Show your character. Be motivated by reinforced judgment, confidently placing your expectations for this beneficial result by looking forward to being with YAHOWAH. With every word, Dowd is explaining this portion of the 22nd Mizmor to us. Not only did Dowd come to appreciate the enduring love and support of his Heavenly Father, all the more because he was deprived of love in his initial inception. But it is by coming to rely on YAHOWAH that he would be the ultimate herald, that he would direct his bashar, that would rise above his adversaries and be accepted by his people for what he has achieved. Which is why he mentioned the sacrificial offering that will be made on behalf of the red heifer, the Adamah Parah, this man of the earth who is productive, this bull, during Towrah. As a prophet, Dowd knew how this would all play out over time. I am now coming to you in advance of Shabuah, so that you can capitalize upon what Dowd achieved during Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurym, and join us as we are liberated from this planet during the promise of the Shabbat, on a Shabbat of May 22nd, 2026, 7 years before I will return to serve as the Adamah Parah, offering the sacrifice on Yom Teruah to ultimately prepare this remnant of the children of Israel to come clean as the adulterous woman is scrubbed by the ashes and the fire and the waters that will all be released by Yahweh and orchestrated with Elia as the master of ceremonies on the Temple Mount, all right before that radiant tabernacle of the tent of the witness, all for the world to see, the greatest show on earth. That's what's being offered. That's what's being made available to you. That is your future, should you accept it. Confidently recognizing that you will be able to enter the very presence of God, live forever, survive this horrible time of Jacob's troubles, and serve beside your King. Well, I thank you for listening to this, another remarkable episode of the YAHOWAH blog. As I, Dowd's herald, and Yahweh's voice at this time, speak of Yahweh's ultimate herald and his most magnificent voice for all time, the Messiah and Malak, Dowd, David. Thank you for listening.